Welcome back to the latest edition, the Whiteout Report podcast. Honestly, this one I feel safe saying the most enjoyable, the most satisfying, the most fun, if that's the word we want to use, episode of the season. Penn State thoroughly dismantles Nebraska 37-10 on a Saturday night at Beaver Stadium on senior night for the Nittany Lions. It's not just that they came out and absolutely dominated a 7-3 Nebraska team. It goes so much deeper than that, because if you look at the season Penn State was expected to have versus the season they have had, to finish off the home schedule under the lights of Beaver Stadium, send out a very special group of seniors with a resounding 37-10 victory over the Cornhuskers, and to break some records and tie some records along the way, makes it a very enjoyable night for the Nittany Lions, for the fans, for the coaches, the alumni, the students, the players, everybody involved. So, as we kick it off here tonight, I'm Marty Leap coming here with you tonight. As always, my partner Dylan Callahan-Crawley, still working through some family things. Again, as I said on Wednesday night on the preview show, thoughts, prayers, good vibes, whatever you're into, make sure you keep Dylan and his family in those right now. But yeah, thank you for being here. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the channel. Make sure you send us your super chats, your super likes, all that good stuff. As we trek through this season, that is, very, very quickly ending on a positive note for Penn State, which is good to see after where things were, as recently as 2 weeks ago, as they're blowing a late lead against number 2 Indiana, suffering yet another gut punch of a loss against the top 5 team in a game they should have won. And they responded well. They responded well last week against Michigan State. I think that was a little bit different because a lot of people, myself included, would tell you Michigan State is the worst team in the Power 4. But they came out tonight against a 7-3 Nebraska team. Now, I don't think Nebraska was as good as that record. As we discussed Wednesday night, Penn State was anywhere from a 7.5 to a 9.5 point favorite, depending on your book of choice for a reason. But it's still a 7-3 football team, a 7-3 Big Ten team that they came out and just thoroughly dominated. I think part of it is the Matt Rule factor as well. And we'll get into this later in the game. I thought Matt Rule was not good tonight. I thought he was thoroughly outcoached by Terry Smith, which if you're a Nebraska fan, that's probably concerning. And if you're a Penn State fan, that probably goes to show you why, even though when the job first opened up, a lot of people thought Matt Rule would get the job, why he's not going to get the job. But yeah, we'll start with the records. Katron Allen is now the all-time leading rusher in the history of Penn State football. Tip of the cap to Katron, 25 carries, 160 yards. He averaged 6.5 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns, along the 50. He surpassed Evan Royster to become the program's all-time leading rusher. Next week against Rutgers, he's going to become the first 4,000-yard rusher in the history of Penn State football, which is saying something because, Penn State has had some amazing running backs. You can go back to Franco Harris, to John Capoletti, Blair Thomas, Lydell Mitchell, Curtis Enos, Kajana Carter, Larry Johnson, obviously Saquon Barkley. The list goes on and on and on. I know I'm forgetting guys. It's just that's how good of a lineage Penn State has had a running back, and Katron Allen is now the all-time leading rusher in program history. So tip of the cap to him. Was awesome to see. Was awesome to see him get it, especially when he originally broke the record and was called back due to a pretty bogus face mask penalty on Katron. Excuse me. And that's what led to not getting it at first. A few plays later, he gets it. So awesome to see for Katron. Nick Singleton as well, tying Saquon Barkley's record for career rushing touchdowns as well as career total touchdowns. That's a record he will break next week against Rutgers as well. So great to see for those two guys on senior night, their swan song at Beaver Stadium. Of course, as the show goes on, you have any comments, you have any questions, please make sure you post them. I will get to them. I will address them, especially when I'm flying solo here tonight. Any comments and questions you have, help move this thing along, help it go smoother for me and for all of us involved. So senior night, again, 37-10 victory. It was great for the seniors because I've harped on this a lot this season. There's a lot of guys in the senior class who, with Katron and Nick being two fine examples, some of the, best players in program history, guys who were a part of a 3-year stretch in which they went 11-2 and won a Rose Bowl, 10-3 and lost in the Peach Bowl, and then 13-3 where they reached the Big Ten championship game, are literally one play away from going to the national championship game after winning a couple of playoff games. One of the best 3-year stretches in program history. And, they came back their senior year looking to make a run in the national championship. That did not happen. But for these seniors to go out this way, a Nick Dawkins, a Dominic DeLuca, Zakee Wheatley, Khalil Dinkins, Denai Dennis Sutton, obviously Singleton and Allen, Zane Durant, who had a tremendous night, Drew Shelton on the offensive line. I know he's not a senior, but Vegaioni, a redshirt junior who may be a first-round pick. This was his last game at Beaver Stadium. Drew Aller being part of the senior night festivities. So many of these guys who are big parts of the history of Penn State football, again, were key cogs in what was one of the best 3-year runs in the history of the program. To be able to go out with not just a win, but a thorough beatdown of a Big Ten opponent, a 37-10 dismantling of Nebraska was so awesome to see. And what was great to see was those guys contribute, right? We mentioned the night Allen had. Nicholas Singleton averaged 6.3 yards per carry and scored twice. Also had 3 receptions for 51 yards with a long of 50 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Dom DeLuca led the way with 10 tackles. Denai Dennis Sutton was a menace tonight on the defensive line, finished with a sack and a tackle for a loss. Same goes for Zane Durant, who also finished with a sack and a tackle for a loss. So it was great not just to see these guys go out with a victory, but to see them play well on their way of going out with a victory. And Wednesday night on the pregame show, the preview show for this, I mentioned, hey, it may seem weird that Penn State is favored, especially by 7.5, 8.5, whatever it was at the time. But a big part of it is Nebraska is not a very good line of scrimmage team. We saw that tonight. I mean, Emmett Johnson on Nebraska's first offensive series in the night ripped off a 52-yard run. Outside of that run, for as good as Emmett Johnson's been this year, he averaged 2.8 yards per carry. So outside of that 52-yard run, Penn State's defense completely contained and limited Emmett Johnson. And we said Wednesday night that's where it was going to start. They had to limit Emmett Johnson. They did that. You have to force TJ Lateef to beat you. Now, I thought TJ Lateef played well. I really did. But, I'm sure Nebraska didn't want TJ Lateef to throw the ball 37 times, especially on the road in a night game at Beaver Stadium, and that's what happened tonight. And oftentimes he was under duress. He was running around, completed just 21 of his 37 attempts. Averages 1.5 yards on the ground. Lateef did rushing for 15 yards on 10 carries, although he did have a very impressive touchdown run on a play where he nearly got killed by Denai Dennis Sutton in the backfield. But yeah, Penn State's defense did what they needed to do. And we continue to see this defense as the season goes along kind of settle in under Jim Knowles. I think tonight was just another fine example of, whoever the next head coach is. I still expect Jim Knowles to be the defensive coordinator next year. And, we're seeing this defense just really slowly but surely start to settle in for Penn State. I mean, Nebraska tonight, 9 of 18 on third down, 1 of 6 on fourth down. It was a all-around really strong performance from the Nittany Lion defense. Nebraska ran a lot of plays. They ran 69 plays tonight, but Penn State held Nebraska just 4.6 yards per play. You'll take that anytime defensively. So a really good night for the Nittany Lion defense. I also thought the youth movement on defense, continuing to see that was a positive. Yvonne Kemajo, I thought, other than Denai Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant, may have been their best defensive player, the true freshman defensive end. True freshman cornerback Darius Dixon, for the first time all year, looked like a true freshman, but you saw a lot of reps thrown him. That's what you want to see at this point. Alex Tash and Keon Wiley, 2 young linebackers who were out there seemingly all night long, nose to the ball, all over the field, making plays. So this defense really starting to settle in under the leadership of Jim Knowles. And again, like I said, I think regardless of who the next head coach is, I expect Jim Knowles to still be the defensive coordinator. So you want to see this defense finish strong. The circle back to the offense, in addition to the running backs, who are tremendous. I mean, Ethan Grunkemeyer was only asked to throw the ball 12 times. He went 11 of 12 for 181 yards and a touchdown. It was awesome to see a really good night at the office from Grunk. Trevor Pena, 4 receptions, 47 yards. Kobe Howard, a guy that, a lot of the year we sat here, thumb the table, where's Kobe Howard? We heard all through the offseason, all through summer, how great he was doing. Early in the game, hauls in a 31-yard reception. Devontae Ross had a 28-yard reception, a 20-yard reception for Kyron Hudson. So while there weren't a ton of pass plays, again, they only threw the ball 12 times. There was a lot of chunk stuff there. except 31-yard reception for Howard, 28 for Ross, 20 for Hudson. Pena's long catch of the night was 29 yards. A long of the night for Nick Singleton was 50. This was the explosiveness we've been looking for in this passing game, really ever since Andy Kotelnicki was hired. And, in recent weeks, it's been better. Tonight, it was really good. And, kind of the bottom of the totem pole there on the receiver night was tight end Andrew Rapouillet. One reception for 4 yards, but it was a 4-yard touchdown, a really well-designed play by Kotelnicki to set a pick that was, maybe could have been offensive pass interference, but if it's not called, it's close enough that it's a well-designed play, can get away with it on Kyron Hudson's end. That set up Rapouillet for the 4-yard touchdown reception. So really just efficient, good night from the passing game. The explosiveness was there. The chunk plays was there, which is what you want to see. Excuse me. So again, Marty Leap flying solo here tonight on the Whiteout Report podcast post-game show here at the Friends of Proline TV. Once again, you have comments, you have questions, drop them in the chat, drop them in the comments section on YouTube. I will gladly get to them. Give us your likes, your follows, subscribe, your super chats, all that good stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because I think, again, we're getting closer and closer to Penn State announcing their next head coach. I would not be surprised if it's by the end of the month or, early December, some point in the next 2 to 2.5 weeks. So once that happens, we'll be here. We'll break it down. Make sure you're here for that. So with that, we'll have a discussion on Terry Smith. It's obvious a lot of the players, a lot of the lettermen, I think at this point, some of the fan base would love to see Terry Smith be the hire. I mean, throughout the night, you heard the crowd chanting Terry. If you watched the NBC broadcast at halftime, Michael Robinson, who, obviously former Penn State quarterback, 2005 Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year when he led the Nittany Lions to an Orange Bowl victory in a Big Ten championship, talked about how he thinks Terry should be the hire, how a lot of players think Terry should be the hire. Post-game interview, you saw Davian Collins coming up behind Terry with a sign that said, hire Terry Smith. When the game ended, the first players to greet Terry on the sideline, which they all did, but the first players to greet him were his cornerbacks. It was Collins, Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington. It's very clear how much this team loves and respects and fights for Terry Smith. That said, I still don't think he's going to be the head coach hire. I really don't, but I think the only way Terry Smith is not at Penn State next year and beyond is if Terry Smith doesn't want to be here. I mean, he's proven himself as one of the best cornerback coaches in the country. He's proven himself as an ace recruiter who has absolutely locked down Western Pennsylvania for Penn State in recent years. I think he brings a lot of value to whoever the next head coach is as that cornerbacks coach, that associate head coach as he is now or was before James Franklin was let go, your defensive recruiting coordinator, liaison to the current roster, the letterman, all of those things. So, I think the groundswell for Terry Smith is growing after they nearly beat Indiana. They pretty much, dismantled Michigan State in a 28-10 victory that was not as close to the final score. They dominate Nebraska tonight in a 37-10 victory. But I still don't think he'll be the hire. But I did want to touch on that because there was a lot of love for Terry Smith at Beaver Stadium and on the NBC telecast throughout tonight. But to circle back to the game, one thing I do want to get into, a couple things, obviously. But first, I mentioned on Wednesday Nebraska not being a good line of scrimmage team, especially on the defensive line. They ranked 90th in the nation in rush defense coming into the night. Penn State tonight runs for 239 yards, averaging 5.9 yards per carry. Excuse me, that includes the nil down at the end of the game as well as Ethan Grunkemeier's sacks. So if you take away Ethan Grunkemeier's night of 4 carries for 2 yards, the Nittany Lions really ran the ball. I mean, they ran the ball extremely well anyway, but if you take away Grunkemeier's 4 for 2 because of no downs and sacks, and they're up at 7 yards per carry. So just a great night for the offensive line. And again, for that offensive line, a lot of senior leadership there. You've got Drew Shelton at left tackle, who's a 4-year starter. You've got Nick Dawkins, a redshirt senior at center, who's a 2-year starter. You've got Vegaioni, who is a redshirt junior at guard, who is a 4-year starter, who's, again, going to go pro, probably going to be a first-round pick, if not a first-round pick, a top 50 pick. And then you've got Nolan Rucci, a redshirt senior right tackle, the legacy, who transferred in from Wisconsin, played a big role for this team last year. Those were 4 guys playing in their final game at Beaver Stadium who came out and just mauled a undermanned and overwhelmed Nebraska defensive line tonight to spark this Penn State rushing attack, which was great to see. I thought it was also great to see Penn State's response early in this game. right? So you have Nebraska, their opening series. They're facing a third down. I think it was 6-7, something like that. Denied Dennis Sutton gets called for offsides, makes it third and short. Emmett Johnson rips off that 52-yard run, and you're thinking, oh boy, here we go. But the defense bowed up. They get a goal line stand. Penn State takes over at their own 2-yard line, and they just methodically march down the field with a 98-yard touchdown drive to take an early 7-0 lead and just never look back at that point. I mean, that drive, it was clear early on that drive that Penn State was going to be able to control the line of scrimmage all night. I thought that coming into the game, the way I viewed this thing as Penn State, I picked them to win. And I said Wednesday night, I thought this may have snowball potential depending on how it starts. You kind of saw it there, right? 4-yard run for Allen, 4-yard run for Allen, 6-yard pass to Pena, then the 31-yard pass to Kobe Howard. Then Katron Allen rips off a 50-yard run, and then 2 plays later, you get the 4-yard touchdown pass to Andrew Rappleyea to make it 7-0. So it wasn't even just necessarily that Penn State took that early lead. It was everything around it. You get the goal line stand, you get a 98-yard drive, that 98-yard drive, including a pair of chunk explosive plays on the 31-yard pass to Kobe Howard in the 50-yard run by Katron Allen. I think it became very obvious on that drive as well that, hey, Allen's going to get the record tonight. You're not have to wait until the Rutgers game for him to break the career rushing record. And again, this was after that drive, they put their foot on Nebraska's throat. They never let up. They never trailed in this game. They led wire to wire. They follow up that drive with a field goal drive to make it 10-0. And then, they get a touchdown drive, another touchdown, go to the half, come out to start the second half, get another touchdown. So Penn State scores on their first 5 drives of 4 touchdowns and a field goal. And I mean, very quickly, very early in the third quarter, this thing's already 30-3. And I think even going into the locker room when it was 23-3, you knew they had it locked up. When they come out and score the start of the second half to make it 30-3, you knew it was over. And I thought part of it, and I touched on this early in the show, that was telling to me, and, if you're a Nebraska fan, it's probably concerning. And if you're a Penn State fan, makes you feel good that Matt Rhule's not going to be the hire, is I thought Terry Smith vastly outcoached Matt Rhule tonight. I really, starting on Penn State's first drive, when they score to go up 6-0, and on the extra point attempt, Luke Reynolds is called for a 15-yard face mask penalty. I thought accepting, obviously we're going to accept it, but to have it enforced on the extra point made no sense to me. If NFL would be different, but in college where a 15-yard penalty on extra point makes it just a 35-yard field goal, I didn't understand why Rhule wouldn't want that enforced on the kickoff for better field position, maybe shave 2, potentially even 3 first downs off of what Nebraska would need on their next drive. Before the end of the half, there was some really questionable clock management by Matt Rhule. There was a 4th down where the Cornhuskers called a timeout before it, converted, got up to the line, and then let probably 7 or 8 seconds run off the clock before they snapped the ball again. And in that situation, they still 2 timeouts. So you've got to do one of 2 things. You have to convert that 4th down. You've either got to call a timeout, or what they should have done was before that previous 4th down, call 2 plays so you can get the line, move with some tempo. They didn't do that. And then the last play of the half for Nebraska, they are facing, it was, I think, 2nd down at about the Penn State around the 45, 50-yard line, and they had 6 or 7 seconds left in the half, so you didn't necessarily have to throw the Hail Mary there. You could have looked, 10, 15 yards stuck out of bounds to make your throw to the end zone easier, or maybe you can get in the field goal range. And they run a little tunnel screen that just gets blown up. They fumble the ball. Penn State falls on it. Just some really poor coaching decisions from Matt Rhule tonight, which, again, I think if you're a Nebraska fan, probably concerning that the guy you just gave a big extension to got outcoached by a team's interim coach, who the last time Terry Smith was a head coach was 15 or 16 years ago in high school football. And if you're a Penn State fan, probably makes you feel, if anyone was still uneasy about the fact that Rhule signed an extension with Nebraska over coming back to his alma mater, I think after the way Rhule coached tonight, after the way Penn State thoroughly dominated his team, you're probably feeling a little bit more at ease about all of that. So once again, Marty Leap here tonight, Whiteout Report podcast, our friends at ProLine TV. Like, subscribe, follow the channel, give us your super chats or super likes. If you have any comments, questions, anything of the sort, drop them in the chat below. I'll address them before I get out of here in about 10 minutes or so. But yeah, just to go back to what I said at the beginning, this season has not been fun for Penn State. It's never fun when you're 5-6. It's made even less fun when you're 5-6 and we're the preseason number 2 team in the country, almost number 1 team. I mean, they were I think like 10 points behind Texas in the preseason AP poll for being number 1. You had people all through the media picking you to win the national championship. So when you have that happen and you're sitting at 5-6, it's even less fun than being 5-6 normally would be. So to get this on a senior night again, just so reassuring for this team, for the staff, for these players, for this program. It was great to see. Defensively, I want to circle back to the defense here a little bit because I thought the defense was tremendous tonight. As I said, held Nebraska to 4.6 yards per play. Outside of 1 carry, held Emmett Johnson to 2.8 yards per carry. Had TJ Lateef running for his life much of the night, just mauled the Nebraska defensive line. I thought the secondary played great. For a lot of the night, Nebraska's receivers really struggled to find any kind of separation, get open at all. And we'll talk about some guys in the secondary. Zakee Wheatley almost had what may have been the most insane interception of the entire college football season right before halftime. And I've mentioned this on here before. I'm going to mention it again. Zakee Wheatley, a guy who could have gone pro, probably been a top 100 pick, made some good money, be playing in the NFL right now, chose to come back. The senior season has not gone team-wise the way he or anyone else has wanted it, but Wheatley has continued to show up every week, be a professional, work hard, play hard. That showed again tonight. Just tip of the cap to Zakee Wheatley for in what has been a disastrous senior season for him. Not for him personally, but team-wise, to just continue to just play hard every week, play awesome every week. On the defensive line, we've mentioned Yvonne Kemajo, we've mentioned Denai Dennisot, we mentioned Zane Durant. I thought Jalen Harvey did some nice things tonight as well. Defensive end, drew a couple holding calls. And on the interior, Zari Fisher as well, another senior playing their last game at Beaver Stadium, was really good off the edge tonight. Nebraska really struggled to block him. And on the interior, I thought just quietly Penn State, Zane Durant's going to get the recognition because he was just a game record tonight. Again, 2 tackles, a sack, a tackle for a loss, batted a pass down. But I thought the interior defensive line as a whole played well. Xavier Gilliam, a redshirt freshman who's played above that all year, had another strong game. Alonzo Ford continually held his own in there. Liam Andrews, a redshirt freshman, came in late in the game, did some nice things. So just tip of the cap to the whole defense. To go back to the secondary, another name that of a guy I thought had a good game, Dejon Lane, the true sophomore safety. If they can hold this defense together with the transfer portal and everything, they're going to lose a decent amount, but there's a lot there to work with. I thought the linebacking crew was tremendous tonight. As I mentioned earlier, Dominic DeLuca, going to forever be a cult hero at Penn State, especially after his performance against SMU last year in the first round of the playoffs. Led the team with 10 tackles tonight. I thought Amari Campbell was tremendous. 6 tackles and a tackle for loss. Doesn't tell the whole story on Campbell. There were a lot of plays where he was just so good with his positioning on the field to blow plays up, to take things away from Nebraska. The goal line stand Penn State had on Nebraska's first drive, he paired up with Zane Durant to make the tackle on 4th and goal or 4th down. But even more so than that, 3rd down, the play prior, he didn't make a tackle, but he fired his gap, filled his gap, occupied 2 blockers, which forced Emmett Johnson not be able to hit the hole, which played a role in him not being able to get the first down in that play. There was a lot of those type of plays tonight from Amari Campbell as well. Just a really good night from the linebackers. Alex Tash, a true freshman, 5 tackles. He was all over the field. I mentioned Keon Wiley. Wiley also had a really nice night in pass coverage, which should not go overlooked for the Nittany Lions also. And then again, I know this is linebacker, but I have the box score in front of me here. I know I've mentioned the night Yvonne Kemajo had. He was all over the field. I did not give you the stats. 4 tackles, a sack, and a tackle and a half for a loss for the true freshman. So I think, Kemajo is a guy that if you're Penn State, just to focus on him here moving forward, looking ahead to the offseason, he's going to be a guy that I think it could be tough to keep because before he flipped to Penn State, he was committed to Virginia Tech, now with James Franklin there. But I think if you look at these freshmen on this roster, Yvonne Kemajo, Darius Dixon, we mentioned, who Looked like a true freshman the first time night in coverage, still picked up 8 tackles, still had a nice night, came real close to what would have been probably about a 70 or 80 yard pick six. Chaz Coleman has been out the last few weeks with injury. Kobe Howard at receiver. Those are probably those true freshmen that you really want to look to keep around regardless of the next head coach. But nice night for Kemba Joe. And also go back to the secondary again. King Mack at safety, 7 tackles. He was another guy who was just all over the field. A couple times where he came in on safety blitzes in their prowler package, got in the face of TJ Lateef, made passes more difficult on him. So really nice night. Again, just it's tough. And I'm not even going to try and find any because there aren't many to find anyway for negatives for Penn State tonight. You outgained Nebraska by 100 yards. You were much better on third down, 5 of 9, Nebraska's 9 of 18, 1 of 1 on fourth down, Nebraska's 1 of 6. You won the time possession battle. Just you took this game by the throat from the get-go, dominated on senior night at Beaver Stadium. Just awesome to see. You feel so happy for these players, for Terry Smith, for these coaches, for the seniors especially. And again, not to keep harping on this, but I just feel like it needs to be said. There's so many seniors on this team who are parts of some of the best games, best moments, best teams in program history, who are key cogs in what was one of the best 3-year runs in program history, whose legacies shouldn't be diminished by the way this season went, starting with Katron Allen, who's now the all-time leading rusher in program history, Nick Singleton, who tied Saquon Barkley for most career rushing touchdowns and total touchdowns in program history. We were talking about some of the best players in program history. So to see them go out the way they did tonight was awesome to see. So, again, thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Drop your comments, your super chats, everything. But here for the last minute or two before we head out, we will check in on the latest on the coaching carousel for Penn State. As I mentioned earlier, even with the groundswell that is starting to form for Terry Smith, I still do not expect Terry Smith to get the job full-time, even though I do think that he'll have every opportunity to still be on the staff next year. And I think the only way he's not on the staff is if he doesn't want to be. But looking at the coaching search, I think if you look at the names that have been mentioned in the last week or so, I think the 4 that have kind of bumped at the top: Eli Drinkowitz, Brent Key, Bob Chesney, and Kalen DeBoer. Obviously not a good day for Key or Drinkowitz, especially Brent Key to, I know they lost by 14 to Pitt, but that was a game that was not that close and at home, and Georgia Tech a chance to clinch the spot in the ACC championship game not coming through. Bob Chesney, though, JMU, pulling out a hard-fought victory over Washington State. All reports are that Chesney is quickly rising here. He's a Central PA guy. It might be a bit of a risk, but I think there's probably a pretty high ceiling there. But I still think the name to watch here most is going to be Kalen DeBoer. I know there was a lot of smoke this week in a lot of different places about that one. Now, Bama comes out next week, beats Auburn, wins the Iron Bowl, goes to the SEC championship game to the playoff. There's probably nothing to it. But if Alabama would lose the Iron Bowl next Saturday against Auburn, things could get a little interesting there. We'll see what happens. But, right now, Bob Chesney certainly seems to be the name that is rising there for the Nittany Lions as the potential next head coach. And if it would be a guy like Chesney who, only 2 years as a head coach at the Sun Belt level, those are only 2 years coaching at the FBS level, regardless, head coach or otherwise, I think that just adds to the importance of retaining a Terry Smith, retaining a Jim Knowles, guys like that with the experience to make the transition for him, as smooth as possible. But that will do it for tonight. Great night at Beaver Stadium. Penn State comes out, dominates Nebraska 37-10 on senior night. A tremendous swan song for so many Nittany Lions tonight, including a lot of Nittany Lion greats, some guys who have been parts of, again, some of the best moments, teams, games in program history. We will be back someday this week. Won't be Thursday night because Thursday's Thanksgiving, but one day this week, maybe Wednesday, probably Wednesday. We'll be back here at the Whiteout Report podcast here at Proline TV to preview Penn State's season finale next Saturday against Rutgers, a game that the Nittany Lions should win to finish the season 6-6, finish with a non-losing record, get bowl eligible. Still don't think they'll accept the bowl berth, but hey, just to get bowl eligible and to avoid a losing record after the way this season started says a lot. I'm Marty Leap. Thank you for being here with us. Again, like, subscribe to the channel, follow us, give us your chats, your super chats, all that good stuff. Thank you as always for being here, and we will talk.